Say good Tavach. I'm recording this daf. This is Sunday's daf, recording it Matzei Shabbos. Give everybody an opportunity to get a little bit of a head start on Sunday's daf. It's just a reminder, Rabbi Richter is giving this shir live in Shul in Meretz Hashem Sunday morning, following the first meeting at approximately 8 a.m. But let's begin together in Meretz Hashem. So today's daf is Mem Vav 46, and we are picking up in Meretz Hashem on the bottom of Mem Hamid Beis. Let's pick up by the two dots. So it is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, about 12 lines up from the bottom. So the Gemara said as follows, Kimaseu b'chol. Excuse me, actually, let's Kimaseu b'chol. Let's pick up there. So the Mishnah said, quoting the Mishnah, Kimaseu b'chol. The Mishnah then goes on to say, quoting Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka, that Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka said, Charios shal dekel hayu meviin v'chov tinosa b'karka. They would bring lulavim. And they would beat the lulavim against the ground, and ultimately, again, va'osayom nikra chibut charios. And that day they would call the beating of the lulavim. So why does Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka have this practice? So the Gemara says, Amar Rav Huna, my time to Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka. What's Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka's logic? Why would he require the taking of the lulav and beating it down against the ground? To which the Gemara says, Tichsiv kapos shkapos. The pasuk refers to lulav, calls lulav kapos tumarim. Kapos is plural. Shnayim. Echad lelulav ve'echad lemizbeach. To teach us that you take the lulav twice. Once the lulav is used as part of the process of the daled minim, and the second time the lulav is used in the service, right by the mizbeach, which was the hitting of the lulavim against the ground. V'Rabbanan amri kapos ksiv. The Rabbanan agree that the word is written kapos. It's true, but it's written without a vav. It's written chaser. So because it's written without a chaser, ultimately it's only one lulav, and that's the lulav taken for daled minim. Rabbi Levi Omer Katamar. Rabbi Levi says that the reason why Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka feels that there's a special service with the lulav is because the lulav, right, the lulav comes from the date palm, the tamar. What's unique about the tamar, the date palm? Ma tamar ze eno elalev echad. To teach us as follows, just like the tamar, the date palm, has only one heart, has only one center. Rashi says over here, Kitamar, time with Rabbi Yochanan and Beroka, lav mikra nafik, ela svara, simen yafe likilus and shayisrael. So according to this approach, Rabbi Yochanan and Beroka does not derive this practice from a pasuk, but really, again, it's the metaphorical meaning or the imagery of what the lulav, the date palm, represents. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka holds like this. He says the lulav has only one heart, meaning one center. So too, the Gemara says, elam elalev echal aviyim shamayim. So just like the lulav has only one center, one heart, so to speak, so too Klal Yisrael only has one heart for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the beauty of this is, what Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka is saying is like this: sometimes you can't judge a Jew by his behavior. So sometimes I may act in a way that looks like I don't love Hashem, but just like the lulav has only one center, one heart, so too I only have one heart for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Maybe my behaviors don't always look that way, but my behaviors aren't always reflective of the lave that I have. Amar Rav Yehuda Shmuel, lulav shiva v'sukkah yom echad. So the Gemara says this as well. So now we transition a little bit to a fascinating sugya regarding the brachas. See, here you have over here as follows. Rabbi Yehuda says, name of Shmuel, that you make a bracha over lulav all 7 days, but sukkah you only make a bracha on the first day. My taima, lulav demifsiki leilos miyamim kol yom mitzvah an benafshehu. Sukkah delo mifsiki leilos miyamim kula shiva kechad yoma arichadamu. Very interesting. So according to this approach of Shmuel, because lulav, you can't fulfill the mitzvah of lulav by night. You can only fulfill it by day. So when nightfall comes, it ends the mitzvah of that day. So each and every day is its own self-contained mitzvah, reflected in the fact that each and every day of lulav gets its own bracha. Sukkah is different, because the halacha by sukkah applies by day and by night. So therefore, the way we look at sukkah is mitzvah arichta, one long mitzvah. And because it's one long mitzvah, when you make the bracha on the first day, that's enough to take you through the entire Yom Tov. V'Rabba bar Chana Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Sukkah shiva v'lulav yom echad. Rabba bar Chana says, Rabbi Yochanan, just the opposite. Sukkah, you make a bracha every day, 7 brachas, and lulav only one day. My taima, what's the reason? Sukkah da'araisa shiva, lulav d'Rabbanan sagili b'chad yoma. So he says, since Sukkah is midoraisa, you have to sit in the Sukkah midoraisa all 7 days. Therefore, halacha l'maisa, you have to go ahead and make a bracha all 7 days. Lulav dirabanan, but we'll talk about this in just a moment. But lulav, which is dirabanan, ultimately again is enough if you make a bracha on one day. Now Rashi says over here, what the Gemara really means to say is like this: that really by lulav and esrog only the first day is daraisa, right? It's true in the Beis Hamikdash they took it all 7 days, and in the absence of the Beis Hamikdash we take it 7 days zecher lemikdash. But the Iker mitzvah is only 1 day, so because that you only make one bracha. So an interesting machlokes about regarding what do you make one bracha, 7 brachos, 2 different opinions. So the Gemara says, Am Rabbi Yochanan, ki asa Rabin, Am Rabbi Yochanan. When Rabin came along, he quoted the name of Rabbi Yochanan the following idea: Echad zeh ve'echad zeh shiva. Both sukkah as well as lulav, we make a bracha each of the 7 days. Each day is considered to be its own independent mitzvah, and you make a bracha all 7 days. Am Rabbi Yosef. Nokit de Rabba bar bar Chana biyadecha. Adopt the approach of Rabba bar bar Chana. Now, what he's talking about over here is Rabba bar bar Chana dafka by Sukkah. Rabba bar bar Chana said that by Sukkah you make a bracha all 7 days. So the Gemara says over here that we pass like Rabba bar Chana. Why the kulu amorai kaimi kabase b'Sukkah? Because all of the other amoraim held like him by Sukkah. Okay, so far we have a machlokes. One opinion saying lulav 1 bracha, sukkah 7. One opinion saying lulav 7 brachas, sukkah 7. One opinion saying both lulav as well as sukkah get a bracha all 7. Let's continue. Meisvei, the Gemara is the kasha top of Mem Vav Amud Aleph. Ha'oseh lulav liatzmo omer baruch shechianu v'kimanu v'gana lazman hazeh. When a person goes in and makes their lulav. Now Rashi explains over here, what does it mean making your lulav? It means binding your lulav together on Erev Yom Tiv. When you bind your lulav together on Erev Yom Tiv, in the act of binding, you say the bracha of Shechianu. It's interesting. Shechianu, the Gemara says, not lulav says, but when you pick it up on the first day of Yom Tiv to fulfill the mitzvah, Omer Baruch Hasher Kiddusham Misasav V'Tzivanu Al Netilas Lulav. So when you're binding the lulav together on Erev Yom Tiv, you make Shechianu. And then when you take the lulav on Yom Tiv itself, you say Hasher Kiddusham Misasav V'Tzivanu Al Netilas Lulav, the Birchas HaMitzvah. And even though you made a bracha on the first day, you make a bracha all 7 days. So remember again, this supports the opinion that says you make a bracha all 7 days on lulav, but it contradicts the opinion that said you only make a bracha 1 day on lulav. Okay. Similarly, the Brisa says, if a person makes a sukkah for themselves, when you make your sukkah, you recite shechianu on the building of the sukkah. Nichnas leishev ba, when you go in to sit in your sukkah. Omer Baruch Asher Kiddisham Sasav Tzivanu leishev basukkah. You make the bracha of leishev basukkah when you fulfill the mitzvah. V'cheivan shebe'erech yom rishon shuv eino mavarich. And once you make a bracha of leishev basukkah on the first day of Sukkot, you don't make any more brachas on sukkah. So the Gemara says kasha lulav alulav kasha sukkah sukkah. This contradicts what we said before. To which the Gemara says, Bishlama lulav alulav lo kasha. It's not a contradiction about lulav. Why not? Kan bisman shebeis hamikdash kayim. Kan bisman shebeis hamikdash kayim. One is talking about a case where the Beis Hamikdash is standing. When the Beis Hamikdash was standing, you would make a bracha all 7 days on lulav and esrog in the Beis Hamikdash. So the Brisa that we just quoted above, when it says make a bracha on lulav and esrog all 7 days, was talking about the Beis Hamikdash. The Brisa that we quoted earlier, the opinion we quoted earlier, say only make a bracha 1 day. That could be referring to the post-temple era. So the Gemara says, "Ela sukkah, sukkah kasha." But what do I do about sukkah? In other words, which one is it? To make 1 bracha for all 7 days, or 7 brachas, 1 bracha for each day? The Gemara says, "Tanaihi." In reality, this is a machlokes tanaim. In other words, we're going to what the machlokes tanaim is as follows: that whenever you have a bracha that has like a prolonged observance, do you make 1 bracha? Whenever you have a mitzvah that has a prolonged observance, do you make 1 bracha at the beginning and that bracha takes you all the way through? Or do you have to go ahead and make a bracha at each and every interval? So another example of this, Tisanya, listen to this. Tefillin. Kol zman shemanichem avarech aleihem divrei Rebbe. Rebbe holds that halacha l'maisa. Anytime you're putting on tefillin throughout the day, you go ahead and you make a bracha. And in fact, Rashi comments over here, Kol zman shemanichin afilu cholzon umanichin mea pamim bayom. Right? If you were to go ahead and put on and take off your tefillin 100 times throughout the day, Rebbe holds that halacha l'maisa you would make a bracha each and every time. Now again, Rashi points out, therefore Rebbe would also hold that by sukkah, every single time you go into the sukkah, ultimately it's its own independent mitzvah, therefore gets its own bracha. Just like every act of laying tefillin is its own bracha, is its own mitzvah, therefore gets its own bracha, so too every act of going into the sukkah is its own bracha. The Chacham disagree. The Chacham say, Eino mavarech ela shachris bilvad. The Chacham disagree and they say, no, halacha l'maisa, on tefillin you only make one bracha in the morning and that's it. That's it. So too, again, what you'd have to say is that halacha l'maisa, according to the Chachamim, once you make a bracha on the first day of Sukkah, the first leishei b'Sukkah, that takes you all the way through. Because in this respect, Sukkah will be different than tefillin. Because when you make a bracha on tefillin, that bracha might last you for the day, but remember, the mitzvah of tefillin is only by day, not at night. So by definition, the bracha comes to an end at nightfall. So the next day will automatically require its own bracha. The mitzvah of Sukkah, once it begins, it extends continuously, day and night, through the entirety of Sukkot. Therefore, again, one bracha would be enough. V'Rava Amar Rava said, Itmar, Abai Amar Hilchos Rebbe. Abai says the halacha is like Rebbe, namely that halacha l'maisa you make a bracha on tefillin every single time you put it on, take it off, and so too on Sukkah you make a bracha every time you go in. V'Rava Amar Hilchos Rabbanon. Rava on the other hand said, no, the halacha is like the Rabbanon. Amar Rab Mari B'rei Devash Shmuel. So Rab Mari, the son. Rab Mari Barad Shmuel, the son of the daughter of Shmuel, he said as follows: Chazina le Rava de lo Ovid Kishmaite. I saw that Rava did not go according with his psak. Rava just said that halacha follows the Chachamim, which means that when you make a bracha on tefillin in the morning, one bracha takes care of you the entire day. So comes along Rav Mari and he says, I saw Rava and he didn't do that. What did Rava do? Listen to this. Ela makdim, Rava was wearing his tefillin. Ela makdim v'kai, va'ila beisakise. He was wearing his tefillin, he had to go to the bathroom. He would take off his tefillin, come out of the bathroom, v'nafik u'mashi yadeh, he'd wash his hands, u'manach tefillin, he put his tefillin back on, u'mevarech, and he would make another bracha. V'chi itzterich zimna achrina, when he would have to go to the bathroom again, ayila beisakise, go to the bathroom, nafik, first take off his tefillin, go to the bathroom, come out of the bathroom, mashi yadeh, wash his hands, u'manach tefillin u'mevarech, and ultimately again, so you see, even Rava, every single time he took off and put on his tefillin, he would make a bracha. Va'anan nami karebi avdinan, and we also paskin like Rebbe, and therefore umevarchin kol shiva. So we paskin like Rebbe on two counts. Number one, if a person does put on tefillin repeatedly throughout the day, one would make a bracha on each and every time one puts on tefillin. Now, if a person's wearing tefillin, let's say I have to go to the bathroom, so I'm going to take off my tefillin, but I have kavanah, I'm going to put my tefillin back on. When I put my tefillin back on, I do not have to make another bracha. I don't make another bracha. But let's say I daven shachris and whatever, I have a moment of his odorous, and I want to put on tefillin. You can put on tefillin whenever you want during the day. If I put it on again, I make another bracha. So too by Sukkah, mevarchin kol shiva. We make a bracha each and every day of Sukkah. So paskin halacha l'maisa, that not only do we make a separate bracha each and every day, but remember, if you're in your Sukkah and then you leave for some significant amount of time, or you have a hesach hadas that you're not coming back into your Sukkah, then you come back in, you make another leishei b'Sukkah. So essentially, we make a leishei b'Sukkah every single time there is a new performance of the mitzvah, whether that's once a day or multiple times per day. Amar Mar Zutra, Chazina le Rav Papi, Tichal Emas Demanach Tefillin, Mevarich. I saw Rav Papi, that's Rav Papi, whenever he would put on tefillin, he would always make a bracha. Rabbanan Devei Ravashi, the Rabbanan, right in the Yeshiva Ravashi, called Emas Demeshamshi B'hu Mevarchi. It's interesting, the Rabbanan Ravashi's Yeshiva, every time they would touch their tefillin or move their tefillin, they would go ahead and make a bracha. So the Gemara says, Amrav Yudam Shmuel. So first of all, before we go on, I'll just point out over here, Rashi points out, interestingly enough, that we paskin, that we make a bracha on Sukkah all 7 days. And of course, you know, we also make a bracha on Lulav all 7 days. Now that bracha I'll only make once a day. When I first pick up the Lulav to go ahead and be out to the mitzvah. In other words, if I have a desire to pick up the Lulav later on in the day, I could do that, but there's no bracha on that. There's no bracha on that. So Rashi just happens to point out, it's Rashi Divrei HaMaschil, Rashi just points out over here that halacha l'maisi, even though the mitzvah of lulav is dirabanan, after day number 1, we could still say a bracha of asher ki deshana mesosav tzivanu, because we make brachos on mitzvahs dirabanan, which we will discuss in depth in just a little bit. We make, even though again asher ki deshana sounds like it comes from the Torah, we make that bracha even on mitzvahs dirabanan. So the Gemara goes weiter. The Gemara says, "Amrav Yehuda Shmuel, mitzvahs lulav kol shiva." The mitzvah of lulav is all 7 days. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Amar Yom Rishon mitzvahs lulav. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says, no, there's only one day, only the first day of the mitzvah of lulav. Mikan ve'elach mitzvah zekenim. From after the first day, it's a derabanan. So on day number 1 it's the Raisa, the rest of the days are derabanan. Listen to this. Rabbi Yitzchak Amar Kol Yoma Mitzvahs Zekin V'Afilu Yom Rishon. Wow. Rabbi Yitzchak says even the first day of Sukkot, the mitzvah of lulav is only midrabanan. So the Gemara says, really? But we've spent so much time focusing that the first day is daraisa. Ema bar miyom rishon. No. Rather, what Rabbi Yitzchak meant was that halacha lemaisa every day except the first day is dirabanan. The first day is daraisa. If that's the case, he's saying the same thing as Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Ema v'chinam Rabbi Yitzchak. You're right. Rabbi Yitzchak is not actually coming to add anything. He's just coming to add his voice to the chorus, which supports the position of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, namely that day number 1 of lulav is daraisa, and all the subsequent days are dirabanan. Va'af Rav Savar Kol Shiva Mitzvahs Lulav. Rav also held that halacha l'maisa the mitzvah of lulav applies all 7 days. Dam Rabbi Chia bar Ashi Amar Rav Hamad Likner Chanukah Sarich Levarich. If a person goes ahead and so remember now the Gemara is just adding on over here that Rabbi Yitzchak held in the name of Rab that you make a bracha on lulav all 7 days. Even though it's a derabanan, you make a bracha on lulav all 7 days. Where else do we see this that we make brachos on mitzvahs derabanan? Here we go. The Amar Rav Chia bar Ashi Amarav Hamadlik Ner Shel Chanukah. Person lights the Chanukah candles. Tzarich levarich. You have to make a bracha. Rabbi Yirmiyah Amar Haroa Ner Shel Chanukah Tzarich levarich. If a person goes ahead and looks at the Ner Chanukah, they also have to make a bracha. My mevarich. What bracha do you make? My mevarich. So Amar Rabbi Yehuda Yom Rishon Hamadlik mevarich Shalosh. On the first night of Chanukah, if you're lighting your own menorah, you make 3 brachos, which we'll discuss. If you're just being yotzei through seeing someone else's menorah, you only make 2 brachos. Mikan ve'elech, after the first night, madlik mevarich shtayim, if you're, first wide line, if you're lighting your own menorah, you make 2 brachos. Vera mevarich achos. And one who fulfills the mitzvah by looking at someone else's menorah only makes 1 bracha. Umay mevarich. What's the bracha? Baruch asher kiddushan v'sasav v'tzivana lahadlik ner shel Chanukah. So just first of all, to go over this halacha. We know this. First night of Chanukah, if you're lighting your own menorah, 3 brachas. Lahadlik ner shel Chanukah, sha'asanisim, and shechianu. If you are being yotzei, not through lighting your own menorah, but by looking at someone else's menorah, because remember, you could do this. Let's say I'm not going to be home, and I walk by someone else's home, I see their menorah in their window, I could be yotzei with their menorah if I don't have the ability to light on my own. If that's the case, on the first night, I only say 2 brachas, the bracha of Sha'as Anisim and Shechianu. Obviously, I'm not going to say Lahadlik Ner Shel Chanukah, because I am not kindling a Chanukah candle. And of course, on the subsequent nights, if you're lighting your own menorah, 2 brachos lahadlik sha'as anisim, and if you're being yotzei through observation, through looking at someone else's menorah, just sha'as anisim. So the Gemara says, by the way, the heichon tzivanu. How can you say asher kiddushan v'sasav tzivanu on menorah? It's not a daraisa. Kadosh Baruch Hu didn't command us to light to kindle the menorah. So how could I say asher kiddushan v'sasav tzivanu? How can you say that? To which the Gemara says, heichon tzivanu milo sasar. Kadosh Baruch Hu tells us, do not veer, do not deviate from what the rabbis tell you right off. So if the rabbis, if the Chazal tell us to do something, HaKadosh Baruch Hu commands us to listen to Chazal. And therefore we can say, Asher Kiddushan V'sasav Tzivanu, which is interesting because according to this logic, it almost sounds like every Rabbanon, every rabbinic law has a quasi-element of a Daraisa associated with it. It makes sense. Pretty incredible. So the Gemara says, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Amar Shal Avicha v'Yagetra. He quotes it from the Pasuk. From Dvarim, Sha'al avicha ve'agetcha. Ask your father and he will tell you. The father in this case is a reference to Chazal. Beautiful. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Masni le'behedja Amarav Kol Shiva Mitzvahs Lulav. So Rav Nachman wrote this explicitly in the name of Rav. We make a bracha on lulav all 7 days. So we know this halacha. We make a bracha on lulav all 7 days, even though again the first day is daraisa, rest of the days are derabanan. We make a bracha on lulav each and every time we fulfill the mitzvah, whether that's 1 time per day or any number of times per day. Tarabanan. Ha'osis sukkah liatzmo omer baruch shechianu. So this is actually very beautiful. Bryce says a person makes a sukkah for themselves. You can actually make the bracha of shechianu while you're making the sukkah. Nichnas leisheba, when you go in to fulfill the mitzvah. Omer baruch asher kiddushanu b'sasav v'tzivanu leisheba sukkah. So when you go into the sukkah, the bracha leisheba sukkah. Haisas suyava omedes. What happens if your sukkah was already built? It was already built. Im yachol lechadish badavar. So if you could add something new to the walls, to the schach, mivarich, then you can make a shechianu on it before Yom Tov. Im lav. But if you're not adding anything new, the structure was already there, then you can't make a shechianu on the creation of the sukkah because the sukkah was already created. What can you do? Then when you go into the sukkah the first time, you can make the bracha of Leishei Basukah and Shechianu. Amar Rav Ashi, Chazina le Rav Kahana, the Kamar Lukula ki Akasa de Kiddusha. This is very beautiful. Rav Ashi said, I saw Rav Kahana, he organized all of these brachas on Kiddush. What Rav Kahana did was, he did not make the Shechianu on Sukkah when building his Sukkah. Rather, he made the Shechianu on Sukkah as part of Kiddush. Now, the truth is, the advantage of doing that is, if you delay the Shechianu till Kiddush, that Shechianu devolves upon two things. It devolves upon the Sukkah, and it devolves upon the Yom Tiv. So you get more punch, right, for your Shechianu, right? Your Shechianu packs a greater punch and this, of course, is how we practice today. We don't make the Shechianu when creating or when constructing the Sukkah. Rather, we leave the Shechianu to Kiddush, and ultimately, again, recite Shechianu and Alei Shev Basukah as part of Kiddush, and that Shechianu goes both on the Sukkah as well as the Yom Tiv. Incredible. Amar Rav Ashi, Gemara says, this is a beautiful Gemara. Let's say a person has a lot of mitzvahs in front of him. A lot of mitzvahs. So the Gemara says, for example, Rashi says over here, let's say it's Chalamayit Sukkis. So you can have the following situation. You have to put on tefillin, or let's say again, right, you have to put on tefillin, you have to put on tzitzis, you have to take a lulav, and you have to sit in the sukkah. So the Gemara, so you have all these mitzvahs. Omer, Baruch Asher Kiddushamu Sosav Tzivanu Al HaMitzvos. Fascinating. So let's say again, it's Chalamayit, assuming a person wears tefillin on Chalamayit. I have tefillin, sukkah, tzitzis, lulav. So the Gemara suggests over here, the Brisa says, instead of making an individual bracha on each of those mitzvahs, say Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Olam Asher Kiddushaну B'Mitzosav Tzivanu Al HaMitzvos. You've commanded on this, and that covers everything. Rabbi Huda Omer, no. Mevarich al kol achas va'achas b'vnei atzma. Each mitzvah gets its own bracha. Amar Rabbi Zera v'yitim Rabbi Chanina bar Papa. Hilchasak Rabbi Huda. The halacha follows Rabbi Huda that each mitzvah gets its own bracha. Va'amar Rabbi Zera v'yitim Rabbi Chanina bar Papa. My time with Rabbi Huda. Why does Rabbi Huda hold that each mitzvah gets its own bracha? Because understand, the beauty of the Brise's approach is, a bracha is a very serious thing. It contains the name of Hashem. One would think that maybe there is a logic to condensing brachas. So Yehuda says, no, we make a bracha on every individual mitzvah. Why? Based on the pasuk, he quotes it from Tilim, Baruch Hashem Yom Yom. Bless Hashem each and every day. So the Gemara says, V'chiba Yom Avachinoso Balayla Im Avachinoso. So you only bless God by day and not at night. Ella Balomar Lecha B'chol Yom V'Yom Titein Lo Me'ein Berchosav. Rather, what it means is, each and every day, on a technical level, what it's saying is, each and every day, you should give HaKadosh Baruch Hu a praise that is unique to that day. That's why during the week, our tefillos look one way. On Shabbos, our tefillos look a different way. On Yom Tiv, they look still a different way. That's it. Baruch Hashem Yom Yom. Each and every day, bless Hashem in accordance with that day. So Rabbi Huda says, Hachanami b'chol davar v'davar tein lo me'ein berchosav. So too, again, give HaKadosh Baruch Hu the proper credit for each and every mitzvah. The same way that we don't just have one davening, one size that fits all for every single day, but that tefillah always reflects the unique nature of the day. So too by mitzvahs, give HaKadosh Baruch Hu the appropriate praise for each and every individual mitzvah. It's so beautiful. If you think about it also on a deeper level, although Asher Kiddushanu B'Mitzosav Tzivanu Al HaMitzvos sounds like a good idea in that you catch all the mitzvos in one basket, one could run the risk ultimately again of making it look like you're bundling everything together. When you bundle stuff together, sometimes it minimizes the individual importance of each of those particular items. Each mitzvah is so powerful. Each mitzvah blankets us with a different level of holiness. Each mitzvah connects us to the Ribono Shel Olam in a different way. Every mitzvah has its message. Every mitzvah has its shefa. Every mitzvah has its koach, has its power. You can't say Asher Kiddushamu Sosav Tzivanu Ala Mitzvos. That doesn't work. You can't do that, because that makes all mitzvahs the same. Mitzvahs are not the same. Every single mitzvah does something different for our neshamas, and it's so important for us to know this, because often we think, there's mitzvahs, starting mitzvahs. Each and every mitzvah, it's like an ingredient, right? You want to make a beautiful food item, you need a whole bunch of different ingredients. You don't say, what's the recipe? You put in ingredients. What ingredient? No, ingredients, don't worry about it, just ingredients. Right? So you can't make a delicacy, which is something called ingredients. You have to know, I need this, I need this, I need this, I need this. My goal is to create a beautiful version, a holy version of myself. How do I do that? I need the right ingredients. What are the ingredients? The ingredients are mitzvahs. The ingredients are, each mitzvah is its own ingredient, and each mitzvah gives a unique flavor. Each mitzvah actualizes a different hidden flavor. Each mitzvah speaks to my neshama in different ways. You can't say, so you have tefillin, lulav, sukkah, tzitzis. You can't say, Asher Shem Tzana ala mitzvahs, all ingredients, all mitzvahs. No. Right? Baruch Hashem yom yom. Tein lo b'chosav me'en yom yom. B'chol davar v'davar tein lo be'en b'chosav. Bless HaKadosh Baruch Hu each and every mitzvah. Because each and every mitzvah contributes something unique to the totality of the person I yearn to become. An incredible Gemara. Last line. This is so beautiful. See how HaKadosh Baruch Hu is so different than people. Midas basar badam klei reikon amud beis machzik mole eno machzik. Says interesting. In the physical world, a utensil that is full cannot contain anything else. So if you want to put something in a utensil, you need the utensil to be empty. So aval midas HaKadosh Baruch Hu mali machzik reika ina machzik. Listen to this. So in the physical world, in the human world, so a full utensil can't hold anything else. You can't put anything else into it. So you have to put, if you want to add something, you need an empty utensil. But by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, only a full utensil is capable of receiving more. An empty utensil is not capable of receiving anything. What does this mean? Shenamar, listen to how beautiful this is. V'haya im shamoa tishma. The Gemara over here quotes the pasuk. V'haya im shamoa tishma v'kol Hashem elokecha. Now, if you listen to the word sounds strange. V'haya, it will be im shamoa, if you will hear, tishma, you will hear. So the Gemara says, what does that mean? Im shamoa, if you're willing to listen, if you've listened, tishma, you will hear more. Ve'im lav, but if you don't want to listen, lo tishma, you won't hear more. What does this mean? Take a look at Rashi. This is so beautiful. Im shamoa tishma, Rashi says, im hurgalta lishmoa as tishma, tuchal lilmod ulahosif. If you've habituated or accustomed yourself to listening, to understanding, to taking in messages, to taking in mitzvahs, to taking in meaning, to taking in musar, if you've accustomed yourself to listen, im shamoa, tishma, then you'll learn more. But if not, Rashi says, "Vim lav shelo hitisa azna ozen bialduscha l'shmoa." And Rashi says, if you didn't habituate yourself in your youth to listen, lo tishma liachar zman lo yaspiku biadecha. You're not going to listen in the future. What does this mean? What the Gemara is saying is something so beautiful, that a person has to make themselves into a shomea. And what does it mean to be a listener? To be a listener, when do you listen? Let's be honest. When do you listen to someone else? When you actually feel that they have something to teach you, right? If a person thinks, I know everything, there's nothing else I need to know, I'm not going to listen. I don't need to hear what you have to say because I know it. And whatever you have to say is going to be wrong. Either I know it already, or if I don't know it, it's probably wrong. In life, you have to be a shema, you have to be a listener. You have to be a mekabel. You have to be someone who's willing to learn, who's willing to receive, which ultimately is predicated in an identity of change. You see, if a person is willing to change in all different ways, I just want to be better, I just want to be different, I just always want to grow. A person has a growth mentality, a change mentality. I'm always listening. I'm always receptive. Such a person, im shamoa, because you've been listening, tishma, you'll go ahead and you'll be able to hear. But if a person is not a shema, a person is not a listener, a person is not a mekabel, a person is not interested in change, a person is complacent where they are, it means you haven't been listening. And if you haven't been listening until now, you're not going to be listening in the future as well. Now, of course, a person could always change, but human nature is such that we form habits, and more often than not, it's very difficult to break those habits. Such an incredible yesod. So what it means is, by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, if your kli is full, right? Your kli is full, your utensil, meaning you've been listening throughout life. You've been ingesting the messages, the meaning, the musar. Then you will continue to ingest because you have a growth, change mentality. But if your utensil is empty, because you don't have a growth, change mentality, you haven't been listening, then unfortunately, the utensil may continue to remain empty until you decide to change your mentality, to change your mindset. So incredible. Davar achar, im shama biyashan, tishma b'chadash. Another possibility is, this is very interesting, if you hear the old, which means, Rashi says, if you review your learning, you'll be able to learn more in the future, which is pretty incredible on a basic level. What the Gemara is saying here is, if you chazer what you've learned, you'll be able to retain it. If you retain it, that'll better prepare you for what you learn in the future. It's a beautiful idea. So the Gemara goes weiter. But if you turn your heart away, Rashi says that ultimately, again, if you give up on reviewing, right? If you give up and you say, what I learned, but I'm not even going to try to retain it, then unfortunately, again, it's much more difficult to learn things going forward. Now, a person can always learn things going forward. What it's saying is, if I learn and I chazer and I review, then I retain. And when I retain, we see this in Daf Yomi, there are concepts that come up all of the time. Sometimes we learn something like, I'm pretty sure I heard that somewhere. I don't know where I heard it. Maybe I heard it like 2 days ago. Maybe I heard it 2 years ago. Lemaisa, if I chazer, the knowledge becomes mine. And so as I go forward and build on that knowledge, I'm able to use what I learned to pave the way for what I'm going to learn in the future. An incredible yisod. So miyatinoko. So we'll say, remember again, the Mishnah said that they had an interesting custom. The Mishnah says, they would take the lulavim from the kids and they would eat the esrogim of the kids as well. So the Gemara says as follows: Amar Rabbi Yochanan, esrog b'shvi'i asr b'shmini mutar. Rabbi Yochanan says esrog is asr, which means you can't eat it on the 7th day of Yom Tiv, but you can eat it on the 8th, which would be Shmini Atzeres. Succah, afilu b'shmini asura. Succah, you can't get benefit from the sukkah, so you couldn't use the decorations or the wood or the schach for anything, even on the 8th day. Not only on the 7th, on the 8th day as well. Reish Lakish says, esrog afilu b'shvinai mutar. Reish Lakish says you could even eat your esrog on the 7th day once you did the mitzvah. And the Gemara says as follows. So, what are they arguing about? Listen to this. Mar savar le mitzvah is katzoi. Reish Lakish holds that ultimately, again, both the sukkah as well as the esrog, or let's focus on the esrog, is only set aside for mitzvah use when you need it for the mitzvah. But let's say, for example, on the 7th day of Sukkot, once you have fulfilled the mitzvah of esrog, there's nothing more to talk about, right? In other words, it's done. You fulfilled the mitzvah. In other words, once you fulfill the mitzvah, you're over. So once you fulfill the mitzvah, you want to eat the esrog on the 7th day after you fulfill the mitzvah, that's totally fine. Rabbi Yochanan, on the other hand, holds that no, the mitzvah esrog is set aside for mitzvah use the entire Sukkot, which means through the end of the 7th day. So whereas Reish Lakish would say after Shachris or after Rosh Hashanah, you could eat your esrog if you want to because you finished the mitzvah. Rabbi Yochanan would say it's set aside for mitzvah the entire day of Yom Tov. So you would not be able to eat it until Shmini Atzeres. So the Gemara says, Eis Reish Lakish Rabbi Yochanan. Reish Lakish raised the kasha to Rabbi Yochanan. Miyat tinoko shom neslo levein v'ochlen es esrogehen. Right? The Mishnah said that it sounds like on the 7th day of Yom Tiv, they would take the esrogim of the kids and they would eat them. My love, huadin legedolim, does it not mean that they would take the esrogim of the adults? What do you mean, just esrogim of kids? It sounds like what the Mishnah is saying is, on the 7th day of Yom Tiv, when they finished the mitzvah of lulav and esrog, they would take the esrogim and they would eat the esrogim. To which the Gemara said, lo tinokos dafka. No. It was only the esrogim of the children. Because remember, again, an esrog of a child is not really hooked to the mitzvah. Since the child is a katan is not really chayiv in mitzvahs. Therefore, the esrog doesn't really have that full mitzvah designation. So the esrog of a child you could use on the 7th day after the child used it for the mitzvah. But the esrog of an adult, perhaps, you would not be able to use until Shmini Atzeres. Iged Amri, others have an alternate version of this. Eis Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish, Miyat hatinoko shom tenes levehem va'ochlen esrogehen. So in this version, Rabbi Yochanan is asking Reish Lakish that the Mishnah says on the 7th day of Yom Tiv they would take the esrogim from the kids. So the Gemara says tinokos in gedolim. Rabbi Yochanan says it's only for the children, not the adults. You see from here that halacha l'maisa, the esrogim of the adults were set aside for non-use for the entire 7th day of Yom Tiv. To which the Reish Lakish would say, lo, huadin dafilu gedolim. It could be they even took the esrogim of the gedolim. V'hai diktani tinokos archa demilsa katani. That's which is said children, because that was the normative case. In other words, I guess by adults, you're not going to go and chap someone's esrog, right? But by children, you could take the esrog from them. Okay. Rabbi Yochanan mashna sukkah mashna esrog. So also here's what's interesting. Rabbi Yochanan has a fascinating right. Rabbi Yochanan holds that you cannot eat the esrog until the end of the 7th day, or until the 8th day. But Sukkah is Asr Ba'ana up until the 9th day, right? You can't get enough from your Sukkah, meaning you can't repurpose the schach or eat the decorations until after Shmini Atzeres. So why that distinction? So this is very interesting. So the Gemara says, "Amalei Sukkah de Chazina ben Hashmashas," because listen to this. Sukkah, technically speaking, let's say it's day number 7. It's day number 7. And it's Ben Hashmashas, twilight period, and you wanna eat something. Where do you eat Ben Hashmashas on day number 7? Remember, this is day number 7 going into 8. So it's the Ben Hashmashas between day 7 day 8. Where do you eat? You eat in the Sukkah. Because Ben Hashmashas is Safek Yom, Safek Laila. Is it day 7? Is it day 8? So you have to eat in the Sukkah just out of Safek. Listen to this. So the Gemara says, Umecha ba begaba is katzay le Ben Hashmashas. So essentially now what you've done is, you've taken that Ben Hashmashas and you've kind of attached it to the 7th day. Now that Ben Hashmashas becomes a part of Sukkot. Umigo das katzay le Ben Hashmashas is katzay le kuliyoma. Here's what's interesting. Once the Sukkah pretty much becomes set aside for non-use because you've used the Ben Hashmashas, the Ben Hashmashas identity follows it through the entirety of 8th day. In other words, since Ben Hashmashas is kind of no man's land, it may be day 7, maybe day 8, since if you utilize that Sukkah on Ben Hashmashas of day 7 into 8, essentially you've now concretized or solidified that Sukkah identity for the Ben Hashmashas, which then again bleeds into the 8th day as well, since the Ben Hashmashas itself has Shmini Atzeres identity as well. So since if you were to want a snack on Ben Hashmashas between the 7th day and the 8th day, you would have to eat it in the Sukkah. Once it was set aside as a Sukkah Ben Hashmashas, that identity follows it into the entirety of the 8th day as well, into Shmini Atzeres, because that Ben Hashmashas partially belongs to Shmini Atzeres as well. Therefore, you can't get any Hana from the Sukkah and Shmini Atzeres as well, and you'd have to wait until the 9th day in order to derive Hana. So the Gemara says, Esrog, to lo chazila ben hashmashos, lo is katzay ben hashmashos, v'lo is katzay l'kuli yom d'shmini. Esrog, there's no such thing. Esrog, once taken in the morning, you're done. There's no such thing as like, I have a yearning to take the esrog later on in the day. Okay, if you take it later on in the day, that's fine. You can take whenever you want. But the mitzvah is done in the morning. Once the mitzvah is done, it's done. So there's never a case of a ben hashmasha situation by an esrog, which is very interesting. So the Gemara says, Levi, Amar Levi says, Esrog afilu b'shmini aser. Levi holds it halacha l'maisi. You can't even use your esrog on Shmini Atzeres as well. V'avur de Shmuel Amar esrog b'shvi aser b'shmini mutter. Father of Shmuel said esrog is going to be aser on Shvi, but on Shmini it's going to be mutter. Kam avua de Shmuel b'shitase de Levi. So ultimately, again, the father of Shmuel established himself like the sheet of Levi. Kam Rabbi Zera b'shitase davua de Shmuel, and Rabbi Zera ultimately held like the father of Shmuel. Like the father of Shmuel. So the Gemara says, Da'am Rabbi Zera, esrog shenifsala, asr la'ochla kol shiva. That if an esrog becomes pasul, ultimately again you can't eat it all 7 days, which seems to indicate to us that halacha l'maisa for 7 days the esrog is set aside for non-use, but halacha l'maisa again on day number 8 you could already go ahead and eat it. Rabbi Zera, a side point already, the Gemara says, Lo likni inish hoshana li yenuka b'yom kama. Person should not go ahead and be makne their lulav to a child on the first day of Yom Tiv. Why not? My taima, the yenuka makne kane aknuye lo makne. A child has the ability to acquire, but doesn't have the ability to convey ownership. So if on the first day of Yom Tiv, I have not fulfilled, let's say I haven't fulfilled mitzvah of lulav and esrog yet, and I want to let my child go ahead and do it. I give my lulav and esrog to my child. They could acquire it. The problem is they can't convey ownership back, which then means I don't own that lulav and esrog. And if I don't own that lulav and esrog on day 1, I'm not yotzei the mitzvah. Vishtachach tekanofik belulav she'eno shalo. Ultimately, again, it turns out that a person, halacha l'maisa, would not have a lulav of his own to be yotzei the mitzvah. Plus, there's an incredible muster in this also, that a child, the yenuka miknakani, aknuye lo makne, a child could acquire miknakani, but can't convey, which is such an incredible, you know what Chazal are teaching us? What does it mean to be a child? To be a child means you could be a taker, but you're not a giver. A child could take, but a child can't give. That's what it means to be a child. Human beings, by definition, are selfish, self-centered, egocentric. That's almost like a default setting. So when we're children, children naturally grab things. Children naturally take things, right? When a child is playing, they take a toy from another child. That's normal. That's not a pigam in the midas of the kid. That's the way children. That's our inherent, innate disposition to be takers. The challenge is that some of us remain children throughout life. The challenge is you could be a biological adult, but chas v'shalom still have the mentality of a child. If I'm makne kani aknui lo makne, sometimes the chas v'shalom go flavor. We say, give me. I want to take, but yet I don't give. And we have to be so careful with this because it's so easy to fall into that childish mindset of magiali. Something's it's owed to me. It's owed to me. You owe me. I'm owed this. I'm owed that. Everyone owes me. What do I owe anyone else? Nothing. That's a child. That's a yenuka. Yenuka mikna koni aknuye lo makni. A child takes but isn't able to give. An adult takes, because all of us have to take at different times. We all need to take, and whether it's materially, emotionally, spiritually, but an adult knows how to give as well. Herein lies the fundamental difference between a child and an adult. A child knows how to take, doesn't know how to give. An adult has to know when to take, but also has to become proficient in the art of giving. A person should not say to his child, this is actually an interesting insight, you shouldn't promise your kids something and then not deliver, which is something that probably most parents often do, right? Don't promise something to your kid. Don't promise your child that you're going to give them something and ultimately, again, not deliver. Why? Mishum da'asi la'agmuri shikra. Because chas v'shalom, my child could learn to lie from me. In other words, if I make a promise, it's such as the Gemara says, Shneimar, lamdu l'shonam daber sheker. They taught their tongues to speak falsehood. Such an incredible yesod. Just on the most basic level, what the Gemara is saying is to model the right behavior for our children. We've spoken of this so many times, that our children remember very little of what we say, but they remember almost everything that we do. So the Gemara is saying, model the right behavior for your children. So if I want to teach my child to be honest, if honesty is a value that I hold dear, then the Gemara says you have to model honesty. Even in the most basic thing, that if you promise something to your child, make sure to deliver. Because if you promise something and you don't come through, the child's, my father's a liar. Maybe not a malicious liar, right? Maybe not an intentional liar, but a liar nevertheless. And we have to be so careful with this, because being a parent means being constantly vigilant with what we do and how we act, because our children are taking it all in. They're observing each and every one of our actions. They're observing our mannerisms. They're observing how we act and react under stress. They're observing how we celebrate. They observe how we mourn. They observe how we interact with our spouse. They observe everything. So the Gemara says they observe if we honor our promises. If we want to teach our children honesty and integrity, whatever you promise, whatever you say, whatever you promise you're going to do, you say you're going to do it. Whatever values, ideas, and ideals you espouse, make sure to live up to them. We'll stop over here for today, and Emir Hashem, we will continue tomorrow with the rest of Memvav, the rest of Zayin. We'll also get to the halacha l'maisa regarding at what point in time does esrog become usable, permitted for regular use, and does lulav become permitted for regular use as well. We'll say again, I'm going to wish everyone a good tavach, even though you'll probably see this on Sunday already, but wishing everyone a good tavach, a beautiful Sunday, and look forward to continuing our learning together. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.